in a home business cult? That's the question. And in today's Good Parts episode number 201, I'm going to share with you a couple of things. Number one, how I would answer that question if someone asked it to me, which, by the way, has happened several times over the years. And that's kind of the point of me doing this video is if you're going to be building a residual income via network marketing or affiliate marketing, odds are at some point in time, someone will accuse you or one of your team members of being in a cult, or even ask like, this looks like a cult to me. And so you need to know how to handle that. And so I'm going to give you my best idea for how to address that when or if that comes up. So I'm going to share that with you. And also in the process of sharing this, I'm going to do my best to define what I think the best definition for a cult might be. And I asked some of my friends on Facebook how they would define cult. And I learned some things as I was reading the comments, and these comments kind of helped me come to a good definition for me. So I'm going to share that with you too. So what I learned from my friends on Facebook by asking the question, what is a cult? So I think this is a fun topic. I'm fascinated by psychology and groups and belief systems. These are topics that are of real interest to me. So I think this might be fun. If you're joining me live, if you would comment below, or if you're catching the replay, comment below too. I'll ask you, how would you define a cult? If you have a definition, comment below, and let's jump into this. So the first thing I want to share is if you're in a home-based business and someone says, are you in a cult? Or really, even if you're in any kind of a group and someone asks this question, I think this would be a good way to respond. Specifically, though, I'm going to come at it from being a home business entrepreneur. So someone says, is this a cult? So first thing I would say is, oh, man, well, I can totally understand you not wanting to be a part of something like that. I also would not be a part of something like that. How would you define cult? And then just wait to hear what they say. And if what they say doesn't match up with what you are in, then you can then say, oh, well, gosh, yeah, I could see why you wouldn't want to be a part of that. Thankfully, what you described is nothing like what this is. If I could demonstrate to your satisfaction that that's the truth, would you have interest in learning more to see if what I'm showing you might be able to be a door to a better future for you, might be able to help you grow some more income? And then if they say yes, now you can go into, the next part of the conversation. If they say no, then it's done. And the reason you want to ask people to define what they mean by cult is because, as I learned in my social media post yesterday, so many people have different ideas of what a cult is. One of my favorite quotes from Voltaire is, if you wish to converse with me, define your terms. Because a word is just a word, and the words are often used to represent whole bunches of different meanings and definitions and ideas. So we have to kind of come to a common understanding of what's being talked about, behind this particular word. So that's how I would handle that. Now, if you're going to handle that and ask this question, hey, Kevin, good to see you. If you're going to handle that question in this way, where you ask them, how would you define a cult? It's probably a good idea for you to have your own definition, right? So that leads into the next part of this video. What is a good definition of a cult? Now, I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm an aficionado. I'm a student of life and groups and culture and business. So I'm not an expert. I'm just a student, just like you. So if you have different ideas, throw them down below and we'll kind of have a discussion here today. But I asked this question on social media, how would you define a cult? And I got all kinds of different answers, as I guess I kind of expected. So what I want to do is I want to share with you some of what came up, and then I want to give you my best definition of how I would describe a cult. And usually when people use that word, by the way, they're meaning it in a negative way. That's usually what's happening. So that's a good thing to be aware of. So here's some of what I got when I asked my friends on Facebook. So the first one was, and I'm not going to say this specifically, but basically here's what I kind of picked up from some of the comments. That other group that I'm not a part of. That's what some of the people commented, And I don't think that's the best definition. We can't define every group that exists in the world that we're not a part of as a cult. That's not a very useful way, I don't think, for us to understand what exactly it is we're talking about. It's probably not a useful way for people to come together. It's probably not a useful way to learn to have tolerance for people who might see things differently than us. So when we're defining a cult, one thing that I want to encourage, and I had to go back and edit my post, right? Because I didn't want specific groups being called out, because that's not a definition, right? A definition is, how do you define the word so that when you understand the definition, you yourself can look at any group you come across and ask yourself, does this match up with the definition? So it's not just specific to one group, because there's many, different examples of what you might call destructive groups, and maybe that's another way to define a cult. Is I heard this on a podcast one time. An unhealthy organization versus a healthy organization. How do we define what is a healthy group of people? Because we as people, we organize in groups. That just seems to be a fact of life. So how do we find groups that are healthy for us? And how do we avoid groups that are unhealthy for us? That's why we want to kind of get into this definition, I think. That's why it's valuable. So another comment that came up was cult is the same as culture. And I actually used to think this, is that I used to think cult was derived from the word culture, which is just the vision and the values and the common set of, language that's used within a group. And what I found when I researched this a little bit is that actually the word cult and the word culture are not related epistemologically. They derive from different areas. And so this is what I looked up this morning. The definition: culture comes from the Latin word cultura, which means to cultivate, like in agriculture. On the other hand, cult comes from the Latin word cultus, which refers to care, labor, cultivation, or worship. So even though they sound similar in the way that we use them today, they're actually derived from different roots. And so I think that's a good thing to be aware of. That being said, some of the comments I got were that any community is a cult. So if there's a school, a church, a business group, one definition was that, well, they're all cults. They're just different, varying degrees of cults. And I see the point there. However, I don't think that's what people are meaning when they call something a cult. When they call something a cult, they're usually not saying, oh, that's a group of people. They're saying, ugh, that's a cult. Like that's bad. So I don't know if that's the best definition either, to say that a cult is just any group of people. So let me jump to the next one. Now, this next one came up from one of my friends, David Frey, and he was referring to the dictionary definition of the word cult. He goes, you want to know a definition? Look it up in the dictionary, right? And I was having a conversation with my wife and son a couple of weeks ago in the car on this topic. And so he said, well, let's look it up, because we had different ideas. So we looked it up, and essentially what the dictionary said was typically a religious group that has views that are extreme or not mainstream. That's how the dictionary defined a cult. Now, my friend David Frey says, well, according to the dictionary definition, this is what he said. He said a lot of Christians would be defined as a cult if you're just going by the dictionary definition. Yeah, it is, right? Cult is a negative word, usually, right? Yeah, good point. Yeah, it is. You're right, Kevin. But what David Frey said, he said this dictionary definition, you could define a lot of groups of cults by just saying they're extreme or they're not part of the mainstream. And this was a problem I had with the dictionary definition, is who is to define what is extreme and who is to define what is not mainstream? If we're going to, right? Because media's in power, government's in power. What if people in power just decide this set of beliefs is mainstream, everything else is extreme, therefore everyone else who doesn't toe the line, they're all cults. So I didn't like that definition personally, because, who's to say, again, what is extreme? And so anyway, skip over that. I didn't like that definition. Next one, Geo, my friend Geo. said mind control. The cults utilize mind control. And he gave a specific example of a certain group of people. And that for me started to ring like, oh, like a group that endeavors to control your mind. Yeah, that might be kind of hitting the mark of what would be an unhealthy group, right? I don't think any of us wants to have someone else controlling our minds, right? So that was a good comment from a Geo. Now, another one that popped up, I think my friend Ray was the first one to mention this. He said there's a few characteristics of what one might consider a cult, a good definition of a cult, and one was usually they have a very charismatic leader that is idolized, I think is what he said. Idolized. And other people just said a charismatic leader. So usually cults have a charismatic leader with a group of people around them, but I don't know, like really, like any group that has a charismatic leader, that would be a cult. I don't really like that one. But the idolization, what do you mean, uh-oh? The idolization, as my friend Ray put it, now that I think hits the mark. If you have a person who is idolized, what does it mean to idolize? I looked this up. I mean, I have my own idea, but I looked it up this morning and it said idolization is where you admire someone too much. Too much. Hey, Veronique, thanks for tuning in. Where you admire someone too much. What's the most extreme case of admiring someone too much? Well, you take whatever they say as the truth and you never question anything they say, and you never use your own brain to ask yourself, is what they're saying true? Because, I idolize them. They're the ultimate. That everything they say is the truth. So I think idolization, a leader that's idolized, I think that's hitting the nail. We're getting closer to the mark. So we've got control, we've got idolization. Now that being said, there was another friend of mine that commented in the thread. Hi, Brianna. She says, yes, never put someone on a pedestal. Yeah, right? Like, can we all just admit we're just people? We're all just people. And have a healthy respect for that fact that we're all human. We can have role models. We can have mentors. We can have people that do certain things and teach certain things that we admire, that we look to for advice without idolizing them, right? Someone that I've looked to for a lot of wisdom over the years is Napoleon Hill, but I don't idolize him. And what does it mean that I don't idolize him? I'm willing to see his faults. I actually read a biography that was written by him, and he had some faults, He's not God. He wasn't perfect. So I think the recognition that he was human means I can admire him still as a mentor, but my mind isn't controlled by him, right? I still have my own mind. I'm still thinking through the things that he taught, and I'm questioning them, and I'm testing them in my life. So idolization, I think, is a good one. Brianna says, yes, I learned that the hard way, which is as good as learned. Hey, we've probably all been there. Hey, Kevin, good to see you. So idolization. Now, one thing that I was thinking when I was writing this out for myself this morning was I thought, well, idolization of a person, that might not be, that's not a good thing probably. But what about idolization of a group? Like, does there have to be a charismatic leader in the group in order for it to be considered or an idolized leader in order for a group to be considered a negative definition of a cult? And what I was thinking was, well, what if you idolize the group itself, but there's no idolized leader, but you're like, hey, this group is the only holy group, and every other group is the non-holy group, That's idolizing a group. What if you idolize a book, right? Where you just say, like, this one book is the ultimate source of truth, and therefore I'm never going to read any other book because I idolize this book. This is all the truth I need to know. Is that a great thing? So I started to think like, well, maybe it's not just idolizing a person that might be an attribute of a cult, but idolizing really anything. Like a person, a group, a book, putting anything in your mind as above question. That, I think, is a good definition or somewhat good definition of idolization. And so this morning, as I was reading through the comments, there was one lady that said there doesn't have to be a leader in the group for it to be a quote unquote, what most people would think as a cult, a negative or an unhealthy group. She said, I know of one group in particular that does not have a central leader, but that I would still categorize as a cult. Why? Because there's some other things going on there. Maybe the idolization is not in the person, but it's in something else, right? Hey, Robin, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. We're having a fun conversation on cults, right? Cults. Okay, so I'm going to continue on here with some of the other thoughts that came up. Okay, so here was another one that came up, two other ones, and then I'll get into my best definition. So another one that came up is common beliefs. So some people think that if there's a group that has beliefs in common, that they're considered a cult. And I don't like that one because I think just groups in general usually have common beliefs. That's what attracts groups together and kind of holds them together. So I don't like that one. But here, this next one that my friend Ray, and he's a hypnotist. Shout out to Ray. He made this comment. This was part of his comment. He made the first comment that I think I was like, oh yeah, you're hitting some nails here. And one of the ones that he wrote was isolation, right? What's isolation? Isolation is where you get into a group and then they say, okay, now we don't want you to associate with anyone outside of our group. That would be one form of isolation. Another form of isolation would be, we don't want you to read anything or learn anything other than what we tell you is approved. That's isolating the mind, right? Isolating the mind. So isolation, I think that was another really good one. So what I'm going to do is jump into what I came up with, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I came up with in part after reading a lot of these comments, and then what I think I'm going to do is boil these 5 points down to 2 so they're easy to remember, because I think all 5 of these can be chunked into just really 2 categories as to what I think most thinking people could agree. All right, when people say cult, probably they're talking about these 2 things. So anyway, let me pull these over. Do you guys want to see these? Anyway, okay. So here's my journal. I was writing these down this morning. So idolization of a person, idea, group, or thing, and I talked about that. Dogmatic beliefs and dogmatic rules. Okay, and I'm going to jump back here and talk about dogma for a second, because we've got dogmatic beliefs and dogmatic rules. What is dogma? Dogma is something that's asserted from an authority that they tell you cannot question. So in other words, they say, this is the truth, the only truth, and you have nothing to say about it. You can't question it. You can't research it. You can't think about it. You can't wonder about it. I'm the authority, and I'm telling you what is true. That is dogma, right? That's dogma. So a dogmatic belief would be if you have a group and the leader is like, this is what's true, and you can't ever question this. That's a dogmatic belief. Or this is what you must do, and you can't ever do anything different. That would be a dogmatic rule. Like, you can't question it. I think those might be characteristics of what someone might think of as a cult, as a cult. And the next one was isolation. We already talked about that. And then the last one was high degrees of behavior control, punishment, with extreme punishment for nonconformity. Okay? And actually, I'm going to jump back to the dogmatic beliefs and rules for a quick second, and then come back to the high degrees of behavior control with extreme punishment. So I'm in a community. Kevin says, great teachings. Thank you, Kevin. So I'm in a community. We started a company 7 years ago, and we have a vision, freedom through principle-centered leadership. We have what we call a manifesto, which is a set of principles that we believe in. And so would those be considered dogmatic beliefs or rules? And I would say the reason they wouldn't be is because we always invite people to test them out, use them, try them, let us know how they work. Feel free to assert another idea. If you think one of these is wrong, let us know. And the simple fact that we are not asserting that our common beliefs and values are the only set of common beliefs and values to have. In fact, one of the lines in our manifesto is tolerance. I always practice tolerance when dealing with others. What does tolerance mean? Tolerance just means I may disagree with someone, but I can love them anyway, and I do my best to make space for other ideas. What if I'm wrong? If I don't listen to other people, I can never fix my error, right? So again, the difference between a belief or a practice that is held in common by a group, which could be a healthy thing to do, like if there's leaders that have learned ideas and principles and ways of doing business that seem to work, and then those things are codified into an organizational culture so they can help more people, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing, and I think that's actually how all groups are organized anyway. So it's not the belief or the practice or the value that's held in common that is unhealthy. It's the dogmatic assertion that people cannot question them and they must believe, and there's no questioning, no conversation to be had. I think that's the unhealthy land. If you start doing that, you're getting into unhealthy land. So recap: idolization of a person, idea, group, or thing, dogmatic beliefs, dogmatic rules, isolation, and high degrees of behavior control with extreme punishment. So I was listening to a podcast yesterday. Hey, Rich, good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. So I was listening to a podcast yesterday, which really sparked this whole train of thought in me. It was a Joe Rogan podcast from this guy who is really interesting. He wrote this book. And in this book, he was asserting that all groups serve the function of helping people know what to do, who to be, what to believe, and that the second thing that they do is when we do those things and when we believe those things, we gain status in the group. And the point of his book was kind of like saying that most groups are, all groups, he was saying all groups are organized this way, that the feeling of status is a universal human need, that we all have it, and we organize in groups as a function to help us gain status. That's what he was saying. And so in this podcast, one of the things he said was that all groups exhibit, the topic of cult came up, and he said, all groups exhibit some form of what people would call cultish behavior. And I question that. I'm like, all groups, really? Well, again, it depends on how we define cults. But the one thing he said that I think rings true is he said, the more strict, dogmatic, highly enforced beliefs and rules you have, the more cultish you probably are in a group. So he was saying that if you have a lot of things that people must do, all these boxes for people to check, then that's kind of leading you more into cultish land. And if you have less of those, then maybe you're a little bit further away from cultish land. And if you look at some of these famous ones that people have defined as cults, and there's all kinds of documentaries, you can watch on Netflix or YouTube about different what they would call cults. You'll see that most all of them, if not all of them, hit this last point really hard. High degrees of behavior control with extreme punishment if you fall out of line. So I think that's a really good last point. Now, I can chunk all of these 5, into just 2 things. So I'm going to do that, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, guys, because I think it's important, not just if you're in a home business, to be able to avoid, avoid groups that are not good for you. I think that's a good thing to do. I've heard people say, MLM's a cult. Really? Every network marketing company's a cult? No, I don't think so. Do some organizations within the network marketing industry exhibit cult-like behavior? Probably. Same with affiliate marketing, same with any group you could probably imagine. So I think knowing these things and defining them for ourselves helps us, 1, to avoid groups that might be unhealthy for us, but then 2, also to be aware and not feel bad about things that we're doing, like a home business. If we're in a home business that's just really good and healthy for us, then we don't want to allow someone's negative opinion to put us down in that. We want to maintain a high degree of faith and confidence. So I'm going to boil all these 5 that I just shared with you guys down into 2. The first one, idolization. The second one, control. That's it. Idolization and control. So if you idolize a person, an idea, a book, a group above everyone else and nothing else matters, only this one thing, that might be a little cult-like, like have more of an open mind. Our products and services, as much as I love them, I realize there are other great products and services out there. My business, as much as I love it, I realize there are other great businesses out there, right? Just keeping that open mind and not idolizing anything, right? Anything. So idolization is the first one, and then the second one is control. So all of the next ones, and I'm going to hit these real quick to show how they fall into the category of control. Dogmatic belief. You must believe this. You can't question. What is that? That's control. That's mind control. That's not allowing you to ask questions and use your mind. Dogmatic rules. You must do this. You can't do anything other than what I tell you. What's that? That's behavior control. Not allowing you to question. Hey, maybe there's another way. Hey, maybe I could do things differently. That's control. Isolation. Don't talk to anyone outside of our group. Don't learn any ideas outside of our group. What's that? That's control. That's controlling your mind, not allowing you to expose your mind to other ideas. And then high degrees of behavior control with extreme punishment. If you leave our group, we're going to shame you and we're never going to talk to you again because you're making such a bad decision. What's that? That's control. That's behavior control. So idolization and control, I think, are 2 easy ways that we can remember as we continue to navigate life and business and do the best we can to be involved with healthy groups that inspire us, groups that teach us, groups that help us grow, groups that help us achieve our goals in life. These are all really, really good groups to be a part of, I think. So those are my crazy thoughts on today's Good Parts episode. Did you find any value in what I shared today? Comment below. I would love to hear. Do you disagree with anything I said today? Comment below. I would love to hear because I try not to be dogmatic, right? I want to hear other ideas and stuff. So anyway, I'm going to close this out. I do these every day, Monday through Friday. I really want to help people build lives of freedom, disconnect their time from their money so they have more time to do the things that they want to do in life. So a lot of my content revolves around topics relating to that idea. So you can subscribe to me on social media if you haven't already and you're finding me for the first time. Best way to stay in touch with me is to subscribe to my email list. And I'm actually going to show you. So when I was showing you my notes earlier, I keep my notes in this really, really cool app. It's called Let's Goal. And it's got some really awesome things that I find of great value, like journaling, vision board, affirmations, notes, inspirational quotes, and it's very low cost. And so if you want to check that out, you can go to growrichmastermind.com/magic. And what you'll get here is a free training. It's called the Magical Morning Formula, which is a training where I teach 7 simple steps for touching daily magic and reaching your goals faster, which is basically, this is just a morning routine training. Some things that I've done every day for a long time that have been of great value to my life and business. And so this training is not about selling you this app, but it does walk you through things you can do every day that can help you get the benefits, some of the same benefits that this app provides. So growrichmastermind.com/magic. You don't have to buy anything to get those benefits. And then as you're watching that training, I'm actually using the app as I teach the training. So you'll get to know the app a little bit as I'm doing this training. And if you find that it's something that you want, I'll show you how to get access to that very low cost app that you might find great value in. And you'll be subscribing to my email list. So that is my live for today. I appreciate you guys all for being here. Want to encourage you to get out there, take action, go for your dreams, and hope you got some value from the episode today.